All right, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Now, the first lesson of this entire master course is fundamental in a lot of ways. And what we're going to start with is an understanding as to what Bitcoin actually is. What does it do? Why the big hoopla? Why is everybody going goo-goo over Bitcoin? What can it do for you? What can it not do for you? And ultimately, what does the technology mean? So the first thing I'm going to explain, and I have videos and graphics and all kinds of things throughout the course. It's not just going to be me talking into the mic, just so you know. But ultimately, when you go to the bank, okay, the bank basically maintains a ledger system of your money. Your inflow, your outflow, deposits, what you spend, whether it's through your checking or your debit card, and they basically manage a centralized ledger system. And it keeps the checks and balances of your account. Now, what is prone to these banks are bank errors. Somebody fat thumbed a zero or took too much money out, or, you were charged too many fees for this reason or that reason. And all sorts of things happen in centralized banking systems and the banking systems alone have created such a hysteria associated with banks loaning more money than they actually have. And, if too many people were to try and withdraw from a bank all at one time, it would create a lot of problems, right? Because they don't actually have those funds. And with recent laws passed, basically citing banks can loan, they don't have to have any reserves. Ultimately, if I put $100 in the bank, they can loan that out and not have to maintain any of it for repayment or anything. The other side to that is banks oftentimes will loan money to other banks. So now the same $100 deposit that I'm putting into this bank can then be loaned out, and then it can be loaned out by the next bank and the next bank. And before long, it's been loaned out 300-400 times, however many times. And you have a lot of banks loaning out money that doesn't even exist, which creates such a significant problem. Now, back in 2008 and 2009, a technology was formed. Now, the origin of this technology is still unknown to this day. I have theories on who invented the technology, whether it was a group of very intelligent technology junkies or it was one lowly person somewhere in some other part of the world. Nobody knows for sure. I believe ultimately it was created by a team of technologists who were ushering in a new trackable technology, which is ultimately called Bitcoin. Now, Bitcoin is a peer-to-peer system that eliminates the middleman. It eliminates the banking systems altogether. You're ultimately able to send money or value from point A to point B almost instantly with minimal fees anywhere in the world. It's from wallet to wallet. That's it. It's immutable, which means once it's minted to the blockchain, it can't be changed or altered in any way. On top of that, due to its decentralized nature, you have nodes operating and maintaining this blockchain scattered all over the world, and over 51% of them have to agree on a particular transaction for it to be minted into the block. Okay, now we're going to start getting into some images here. This is it's like an original picture of the Bitcoin blockchain, dated and named Satoshi Nakamoto of October 31st, 2008. Now, the original Bitcoin white paper can be found all over the place. This is on bitcoin.com. And ultimately, you can learn all there is to know about this technology, how transactions work, what's the nature of it. But ultimately, it's an immutable, trustless system whereby people can send value from point A to point B instantly with minimal fees. That's ultimately what it boils down to. And the network is maintained by a network of computers or nodes, if you will. These computers are what we call mining. So these transactions that are being processed on the blockchain are ultimately being confirmed by these miners. And anytime one of these mining nodes or mining computers mints a block of their own, they are rewarded in Bitcoin. Okay, so what happens is all these computers, now you might hear about mining farms, basically mining in big buildings full of ASICs miners. It's because the technology has to get faster and faster to continue mining competitively on a blockchain that ultimately gets more difficult about every 6 months based off of how many miners there are, the hash rate. This is all stuff that we'll get into a little bit here. The hash rate, which is how much mining power or processing power is mining up these transactions, and several different variables. And these mining farms are basically hundreds of different mining computers working in the same pool, so that if one computer gets a block or mints a block on the chain, all of those mining operators are sharing in that reward, rather, because ultimately you're increasing the likelihood of minting a block by pooling a bunch of computers together, mining together, sharing the rewards of all of their work, rather than just have one computer on the system mining, hoping someday it manages to mint a block amongst the thousands and thousands of ASICs miners that are out there mining. So let's go through this. This is a graphic explaining how blockchain technology works in a nutshell. So step one here is a transaction is requested, whether it's sending value or receiving value for the most part. The transaction is broadcasted to a peer-to-peer network that consists of computers, otherwise known as nodes. The network of nodes uses known algorithms, which in the Bitcoin case is the SHA-256 algorithm, to validate the transaction and user status. These algorithms are ultimately cryptographic solutions, ciphers that are used to encrypt data that gets basically pushed out to all of these nodes. A verified transaction can involve cryptocurrency, contracts, records, or other information. Contracts is not a thing with Bitcoin yet. For the most part, it's basically just a peer-to-peer value transaction network. Smart contracts didn't get introduced until Ethereum, which we're going to talk about in the next video. Number 5, the transaction is combined with other transactions, once verified, to create a new block of data for the ledger. At number 6, the new block is added to the existing blockchain, which is permanent and unalterable. Number 7, the transaction is finished. So ultimately what you have is a network of computers working together to confirm these transactions and make sure that nothing's being fiddled with, nothing's being altered mid-process, so forth and so on. And ultimately eliminating the middleman altogether. You don't need banks with a decentralized blockchain ledger system. And there are different variables to how a ledger system may be made up, which is what opens up the door for new technology. In other words, if you look at the SHA-256 algorithm or Bitcoin blockchain, the way it operates and the way the blockchain in the ledger system is structured, it may be very different to Ethereum, which originated on like the ERC20 algorithm, or you have HBAR, which is a completely different system altogether. But ultimately, the same bodes true for all of them. They're more or less peer-to-peer networks of computers working together to solve these problems, and the people that are putting up the money to have this hash power to confirm these transactions on the blockchain, constantly mining, if you will, they're rewarded in Bitcoin. Now, the mining infrastructure that has been coded into the Bitcoin algorithm is one that automatically cuts mining yield in half every 4 years. And we're going to go into that in the market cycle lecture of this course. But these halving cycles play a significant role in the current trend of bear and bull market as it relates to cryptocurrencies. Outside of all of the macroeconomics and the global news and so forth and so on, there is a hard-coded halving in the blockchain. So every 4 years, without fail, Bitcoin mining is immediately cut in half, which means if there's 1,000 miners out there in the world and they are mining up this Bitcoin and we reach a point of halving, well, if those miners were mining up, 20 Bitcoin a day, well, now those same 1,000 miners are only mining 10 Bitcoin a day, which ultimately lowers the supply as education and demand increases, ultimately creating these bull market cycles. Okay, so that's ultimately Bitcoin in a nutshell. Currently, it's trading at 16,700 thereabouts. We're in a bear market. We just reached new lows today, as a matter of fact, which I took as a signal. and we're going to get into a lot of the stuff and how and how this stuff works. But ultimately, yeah, you can see it right here. Bitcoin's currently trading at 16,791. It's going up and down a little bit on a regular basis. And if I go down here, you can see the peaks of the various bull market peaks. The most recent one I called on Twitter as I called the peak to the day. And I said there were, in that same afternoon, I said we're going to have a 2-peak cycle. And there are reasons for that I'll get into later. I was one of the few people out there that actually called this 2-peak cycle. So pat on my back. As I always say, I'm always right sometimes. So hopefully this at least gives you a fundamental understanding as to what blockchain technology is, how it works, what it means, and ultimately how we have then grown from the original Bitcoin technology, the algorithm, the mining cycles, all that stuff, and how it's grown into new technology, which leads us into Ethereum, which is the next lecture. I'll see you there.